But do you guys still talk, or is it kind of a little resistance right now? Because
I ain't spoke with him in about a month. Maybe about a month.
Do you still speak, or has distance taken hold? At that point, nearly a month had passed without contact. What was once constant communication had thinned into silence, and that silence carried its own weight. The rupture between Lil Wayne and Birdman did not remain confined to disputes over contracts or money. As tensions escalated, allegations surfaced that suggested something far more serious. Around the same time, footage emerged that hinted at retaliation being contemplated. What began as a mentor-student bond, rooted in loyalty and trust, appeared to be unraveling into something volatile. This was the moment many now trace back to as the turning point, the night that altered the course of everything. April 26, 2015, started without warning. Lil Wayne performed at an Atlanta nightclub, completing what seemed like a routine tour stop. Hours later, as his convoy traveled along Interstate 285, gunfire struck both of his tour buses. 12 people were inside. The vehicles were damaged by multiple rounds. No one was physically injured. That absence of injury did little to diminish the shock. Instead, it deepened it. The shooter was identified as Jimmy "Pee Wee" Winfrey, a figure connected to the industry and affiliated with Young Thug's circle. Police had previously escorted the buses following reported threats at the venue. Witnesses later described Winfrey being seen earlier that night with a weapon. After the escort ended, the buses were fired upon. Winfrey fled, attempting to conceal evidence before leaving the state. In the days that followed, the incident rippled outward. Public reactions intensified. Legal processes began. On July 30, 2015, Winfrey was indicted on numerous charges. The indictment also named two individuals as unindicted co-conspirators, Birdman and Young Thug, based on alleged associations and communications. Prosecutors outlined theories of motive tied to ongoing financial and legal conflicts, including Wayne's lawsuit against Cash Money Records. These assertions rested heavily on circumstantial evidence, phone records, social media posts, lyrics, and affiliations. None resulted in criminal charges against Birdman or Young Thug. A civil lawsuit filed by the bus driver later added another layer, introducing a leaked phone call and allegations of promised compensation. Those claims were firmly denied. Birdman's representatives rejected any connection between the call and the shooting, maintaining that he would never support harm toward Wayne and that he actively cooperated with investigations. Young Thug also denied involvement. The case against Winfrey moved forward unevenly, guilty pleas, reversals, and later convictions, while broader questions remained unresolved. Over time, the shooting resurfaced repeatedly in court proceedings and public debate, cited as context rather than conclusion. No definitive legal determination ever linked Birdman or Young Thug to the attack. What remained was uncertainty, and the lingering psychological impact of proximity to violence. The shooting transformed a bitter business dispute into something far more unsettling. A relationship once described in familial terms, father and son, was now shadowed by fear and mistrust. The empire they built together, forged in the streets and sustained by loyalty, suddenly carried associations neither could fully escape. To understand the depth of that fracture, it is necessary to return to the beginning. In the early 1990s, a young Dwayne Carter met Brian "Birdman" Williams in New Orleans. Accounts differ on how the introduction happened, but the outcome is undisputed. That meeting reshaped both of their lives and the direction of Southern hip-hop. Birdman co-founded Cash Money Records in 1991, operating far from corporate structures. The label was built through independent hustle, physical distribution, and a sound rooted in lived experience. It was raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically local. This was not boardroom music. It was survival translated into rhythm. This was music rooted in survival. Verses and rhythms carried the weight of lived experience, documenting struggle without ornament. From Hollygrove, a young Dwayne Carter emerged with a voice that was impossible to ignore. He first caught Birdman's attention not through formal meetings, but by leaving freestyles on an answering machine, raw, unpolished recordings that sounded less like ambition and more like urgency. These were not casual performances. They were reflections of a child who understood, early on, that music might be his only way out. In New Orleans at that time, the paths forward were brutally narrow. Writing, athletics, or entertainment offered a fragile chance at escape. Everything else led somewhere darker. When Wayne was introduced to Birdman, the connection formed quickly. Birdman later described seeing him as a son, an idea shaped as much by circumstance as by choice, in a city where stable father figures were often absent. By 1993, at just 11 years old, Wayne signed with Cash Money Records as part of the BGZ, becoming the youngest artist on the label. Their debut album followed 2 years later, filled with stark portrayals of street life that mirrored the reality around them. In 1995, Wayne's stepfather, Reginald McDonald, was killed. The loss left a deep psychological wound. In its aftermath, Birdman's role in Wayne's life became more pronounced, filling a void left by trauma. Wayne began calling him Daddy or Pops, language that reflected both affection and dependency. Cash Money's ascent was rapid. A major distribution deal in the late 1990s pushed the label onto the national stage. The Hot Boys formed, albums went platinum, and Wayne, still a teenager, became a central figure in a growing empire. Publicly, the bond between Wayne and Birdman was reinforced through interviews and appearances. Wayne spoke of Birdman as family, not management. Their closeness, at times misunderstood by outsiders, was consistently framed by both men as paternal and familiar. As the success multiplied, so did the image. Cash Money came to symbolize excess, cars, jewelry, spectacle, and Wayne stood at the center of it all. He was the proof of concept, the artist who validated the system Birdman had built. In 2005, Wayne was named president of Cash Money and founded Young Money Entertainment, extending the legacy further. The rise of artists like Drake and Nicki Minaj only solidified his influence. Albums broke records. Collaborations reinforced the narrative. Even the title of their joint project, Like Father, Like Son, reflected how they wanted the world to understand their relationship. Yet beneath the celebration, there were signs of strain. Other artists who had helped build the label began to leave, often citing disputes over compensation and control.
I believe that. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think Birdman really loves Wayne in that way. I believe that he would not want Lil Wayne harmed in that way, and I don't think he would associate with somebody who tried to do harm to Lil Wayne.
Lawsuits were filed. Key collaborators walked away. The label's methods, shaped by its origins outside traditional corporate structures, drew criticism. Through it all, Wayne remained. Loyalty defined his position. He trusted Birdman completely, placing faith not only in the business, but in the man he believed had raised him. That trust would later be tested. By the early 2010s, as Young Money generated unprecedented revenue, questions began to surface about finances and control. A major deal intended to support Wayne's imprint and its artists became a point of contention. Wayne later expressed the belief that decisions were being made without him, that resources tied to his success were being redirected, and that a future was being prepared in which he was no longer central. The delays surrounding the Carter V became the breaking point. The album was completed, then withheld. Release dates came and went. Explanations were scarce. Wayne described feeling confined, creatively and contractually, inside an institution he had helped build. Speculation filled the gaps left by silence, but what was clear was the emotional toll. The sense of betrayal cut deeper because it came from someone he had trusted as family. On December 4, 2014, the conflict moved into the open. Wayne chose a public platform to voice his frustration, accusing Birdman of blocking the album's release and declaring himself trapped. It was not a calculated press move. It read as exhaustion. After more than 2 decades of shared history, the relationship fractured in full view of the public. What followed would escalate far beyond business. The bond forged in the streets of New Orleans, once defined by survival and loyalty, was now marked by silence, legal conflict, and fear. An empire built from nothing stood on unstable ground, its collapse no longer theoretical, but imminent. This was not a subtle message. Wayne had reached the end of his patience, no longer willing to wait, negotiate quietly, or trust that Birdman would resolve the situation in good faith. He wanted out, and he wanted that fact to be unmistakable. When he spoke publicly, the impact was immediate. The announcement moved through hip-hop like a shockwave. The idea of Wayne and Birdman, long framed as father and son, now in open conflict felt surreal. Yet it was unfolding in real time. 2 days later, at Vice's 20th anniversary party, Wayne addressed the crowd directly. He admitted he was trapped in a bad situation, but insisted he would be free soon. The strain in his voice was unmistakable. This was no longer a disagreement over contracts or percentages. It was personal. The man Wayne had called Daddy for more than 2 decades was now, in his view, the one preventing him from releasing music and moving forward with his career. In January 2015, Wayne released the mixtape Sorry for the Wait 2. Publicly, it functioned as a gift to fans still waiting for the Carter V. Privately, it served as a declaration of open conflict. The project contained direct shots at Cash Money and Birdman. On one track, Wayne made it explicit that his loyalty now lay solely with Young Money. The message was unambiguous: Cash Money was no longer home. On January 25, 2015, Wayne escalated the dispute by filing a $51 million lawsuit against Cash Money Records. He alleged breach of contract, claiming the label had deliberately withheld the Carter V despite its completion and failed to pay royalties owed to him. He sought to terminate his contract entirely and regain control of Young Money, including the ability to take its artists, most notably Drake and Nicki Minaj, with him. Wayne's manager, Cortez Bryant, publicly supported the lawsuit, arguing that Wayne had carried Cash Money financially for over a decade and had been repaid with obstruction. In a February 2015 Rolling Stone interview, Wayne revealed that he and Birdman were no longer speaking at all. He referred to the Carter V as a dead subject, signaling how deeply the situation had affected him. Throughout 2015, the conflict intensified. Wayne dissed Birdman repeatedly in freestyles, live performances, and guest appearances. During a Jacksonville show in April, he openly criticized Cash Money in front of the crowd. Behind the scenes, both sides offered conflicting narratives. Birdman maintained publicly that their relationship was intact and insisted he never wanted business to interfere with what he described as a father-son bond. Yet reports suggested the two were working in the same studios without speaking. In May 2015, Wayne delivered another direct shot on A$AP Rocky's M$, declaring the end of Cash Money. That summer, he partnered with Tidal to release FWA, Free Weezy album, which included additional diss records. Birdman responded by filing a $50 million lawsuit against Jay-Z and Tidal, alleging interference with Cash Money's business. The dispute had expanded beyond Wayne and Birdman, pulling major corporations into the fallout. Tensions occasionally appeared to ease. On New Year's Eve 2016, Wayne and Birdman reunited on stage at Drake's party, sparking rumors of reconciliation. Birdman again referred to Wayne as his son, but the moment proved temporary. In March 2016, Wayne filed another lawsuit, this time against Universal Music Group, seeking over $40 million. He alleged that UMG had improperly diverted Young Money profits from artists like Drake and Nicki Minaj to cover Cash Money's debts, violating his ownership stake. By late 2016, Wayne publicly hinted at retirement. He claimed Birdman had misappropriated tens of millions of dollars from advances that were contractually owed to him. A judge later ordered financial disclosures, bringing the internal operations of Cash Money under scrutiny. Fans watched as a relationship once defined by loyalty and survival collapsed under legal pressure. At its core, Wayne's legal argument was consistent. He claimed that the Carter V had been completed, that required advances were never fully paid, that royalty statements were withheld, and that his promised ownership and profit participation in Young Money were ignored. He described feeling creatively and financially imprisoned, unable to release music or control the label he helped build. The lawsuit stalled Wayne's career for years. The Carter V, originally scheduled for 2014, would not be released until September 2018. When it finally arrived, it marked the end of a long, public battle that exposed the risks artists face in opaque label structures and unequal power dynamics. What had once been portrayed as a father-son partnership collapsed into one of hip-hop's most visible and painful legal wars. An empire built together in New Orleans fractured under the weight of money, control, and broken trust. And as the conflict continued, it became clear this was no longer just about business, it was about freedom. Birdman's standing suffered lasting damage as the dispute unfolded, reinforcing a long-standing perception shaped by earlier conflicts involving other Cash Money artists. What followed was not spectacle, but scrutiny. Court-ordered disclosures forced rare visibility into how major advances had been handled, drawing sustained attention to the inner workings of the label. The legal fallout extended beyond Wayne himself. Royalty disputes rippled through Young Money, affecting artists whose success now sat inside an increasingly unstable structure.
According to Alvin Lewis, he's saying that Birdman promised Jimmy Winfrey $250,000 and a Porsche, and that was for the shooting.
Where's he getting this information from?
I have no idea.
Exactly, man. You can't be believing these second, third hands.
Birdman responded aggressively, countersuing Tidal and Jay-Z over the release of Free Weezy album in 2015, an effort widely understood as an attempt to halt Wayne's momentum. Wayne continued independently, releasing the project through Tidal while negotiations stalled behind closed doors. Settlement talks surfaced repeatedly, only to collapse again and again. Each breakdown deepened the sense of exhaustion. Reports at the time suggested Wayne no longer sought reconciliation, only release, financially, contractually, and emotionally. Public moments of reunion, such as the 2016 New Year's Eve appearance with Drake, were followed by renewed distance, creating a cycle that felt unresolved and unstable. In mid-2018, the conflict finally reached its legal conclusion. Court filings confirmed that all parties, including Cash Money, Birdman, and Universal Music Group, had reached an agreement, bringing years of litigation to an end. The specific terms were sealed. What was known was limited. Wayne received a substantial payout, widely reported to be well into 8 figures, and was fully released from Cash Money with no remaining contractual obligations. His legal team confirmed that details would remain undisclosed. What mattered more than the number was the outcome. Wayne emerged owning his masters, his catalog, and his future. Going forward, his releases would be handled directly through Universal, removing intermediaries that had once controlled his output. For the first time in years, his career moved without obstruction. That clarity was reflected in the release of the Carter V on September 28, 2018. After years of delay, the album arrived unencumbered. It debuted at number 1, selling nearly 500,000 units in its first week. The response was not celebratory, it was vindicating. Wayne had endured years of silence, litigation, and public fracture, and still remained commercially dominant. The settlement closed the Cash Money chapter, but it did not erase its emotional weight. Money changed hands, lawyers stepped aside, yet the deeper question lingered, whether trust, once broken so publicly, could ever be rebuilt. Months later, at Lil Louisiana Fest, Birdman stepped onto the stage and offered a public apology. His words were restrained, acknowledging damage and expressing a desire to repair what had been lost. It was not a declaration of resolution, but an attempt at it. Subsequent appearances together suggested a cautious thaw, a willingness to coexist rather than reopen old wounds. In the years that followed, their relationship settled into something quieter. Occasional reunions, shared stages, and public reflections replaced lawsuits and accusations. By 2024 and 2025, they appeared on generally stable terms, no active disputes, no legal battles, only a complicated history carried forward. Public opinion remains divided. Some see healing, others remain skeptical, shaped by memories of prolonged conflict and unresolved questions. But the record is clear, the battle reshaped both men. It dismantled an empire as it once existed, exposed the cost of power without accountability, and left behind a legacy defined not just by success, but by what it took to survive it. Fans continue to notice moments of visible tension, subtle interruptions, shortened exchanges, body language that suggests distance rather than ease. The relationship functions, but it does not appear fully healed. And that may be the most honest outcome. Trust, once broken at that scale, rarely snaps back into place, especially when millions of dollars, years of control, and allegations of real-world violence are part of the story. The aftermath reveals a layered truth. Lil Wayne won his independence. He secured creative freedom, ownership of his catalog, and control over his future, an outcome few artists ever achieve after entering the system so young. Birdman retained his empire, but in a diminished form. Cash Money's dominance faded as Young Money's stars ultimately eclipsed the parent label that once controlled everything. The feud pulled back the curtain on long-standing industry practices, exploitative contracts, recoupment traps, and mentorships that blurred into control. It reignited conversations about artist rights and power imbalances, and it emboldened others to challenge systems that had long gone unquestioned. But the cost was severe. Years of delayed music, a public unraveling of a father-son bond played out in real time. Accusations that crossed from business into life and death territory. An empire built from nothing pushed to the brink of collapse by the very people who created it. In the end, both men chose to stop the bleeding. They chose coexistence over continued destruction. Whether that choice was driven by genuine forgiveness or mutual necessity remains unanswered. What's clear is this: the story didn't end with a clean victory. It ended with survival. And sometimes, in hip-hop and in life, that's the real ending. Enjoying the content? Make sure to check out the suggested videos by clicking the cards on your screen.